Hey, good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Gadi Schwartz coming to you from Los Angeles, where once again we are following news that could impact all of us developing right now in the U.S. Senate. That's where senators appear to be trying to fast track that debt ceiling vote to avoid the nation defaulting on its $31 trillion debt. And that could affect everything from government jobs, services, benefits, the stability of global markets, even student loans.
On top of paying rent and wherever I'm going to be living after college, I have to worry about that as well.
Plus, he joked about regretting his marriage on Family Feud. Now a jury just found him guilty of murdering his wife.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Timothy Bleefnick, guilty of first-degree murder, signed by the 4-person and 11 jurors.
And fresh off their latest launch and landing, Virgin Galactic is looking to send more people to space. But if you want in, you better start saving up. A round-trip ticket is reportedly close to $500,000. Two of Earth's newest astronauts who just touched back down are here to tell us all about it.
3, 2, 1, release, release, release. Fire, fire.
And tonight it is going to be another late one on Capitol Hill. And if you thought this whole debt ceiling crisis might have been averted because the House voted to pass it last night, well, tonight is when we really find out what kind of wrenches could get thrown into the mix here. We've got our eyes on the Senate floor right now, where lawmakers are voting on and debating 11 amendments to the bill. Then they are supposed to vote on a final passage. Now, that vote started about 30 minutes ago, and the goal here is to make this go as quickly as possible. Now, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, that bipartisan bill that President Biden and Speaker McCarthy drew up to raise the debt ceiling, needs to be on the president's desk by Monday before the government basically runs out of money and hits the $31 trillion credit limit. All day, senators have quite literally been running back and forth to work out agreements to get all of this done tonight, because that deadline, that timeline is really only possible if nearly everything goes according to plan right now. And those amendments we mentioned earlier, if we see any of those pass, those could send the bill back to the House for a vote, something that would take way more time than congressional leaders have right now. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us now with some of the wrenches that we are about to see chucked in here at the last minute, right? Ali, I mean, first off, I guess before we get into any of the possible complications, can you paint us the best case scenario timeline now that we know that those amendment votes have started? They are moving relatively fast, right? What does it look like?
Well, I guess we'll see. I mean, the best case scenario, and I say that both for the country and also selfishly for me, like getting to bed before midnight, is that if I were to do the math on the back of a napkin here, which we were doing in our Senate booth, is that it'll probably take them until around 11 p.m. if they move quickly and according to the time that's assigned to each of these votes. That's when they'll wrap up. We'll probably be out of here around midnight, and that means that they are well ahead of their deadline, and senators will also, on top of that, get their weekend. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is that one of these amendments that we're watching actually passes. The reason that would be a big problem is because any amendment that gets added to this bill means that it has to go from the Senate back to the House before it can go to the White House. As you mentioned in your lead, we don't have time for that. The X date is looming on Monday. Right now, the way that you should think of these amendment votes is they're sort of like the necessary evils to actually get to the main event, which is the actual vote on the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which is the reason that everybody is here. These amendments are sort of like votes just to have them so that senators can say they tried, even though we don't expect any of them to pass.
Votes just to have them, music to everyone's ears. So talking about the curveballs here, we know 11 amendments are expected to be put forward, but do we know what they are? These are last minute drops, who they're filed by. Is it mostly Republicans? Is it Democrats as well? Is this a mix?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mix. 10 of them are from Republicans, 1 is from a Democrat, and that 1 from a Democrat is actually, if I am just outright a nerd, that's the most interesting one, most likely in this mix of things, because it's about this thing called the Mountain Valley Pipeline, and it's a pipeline that runs through West Virginia and Virginia. It's something that one Democrat, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, is in favor of, but that his fellow senator in Virginia, Tim Kaine, is against. Kaine is the one who who's sponsoring this amendment. Again, we don't expect it to pass, but it is a moment where Democrats are sparring over one key issue that's in this bill. The rest of them, though, are things that we sort of were able to predict, because it's many things from Republicans, from concerns about caps on defense spending, as well as just the overall spending budget of the United States. Those are some of the amendments that we anticipated and now are playing out on the floor.
Allie, you're the coolest nerd I know. Now,
oh, thank you so much.
I got to ask, when it comes to these amendments, I know that there may be different thresholds to get one of these possibly passed. Is there a potential for one of them to maybe become a poison pill that everyone just has to swallow to get this whole entire thing through?
I don't think so. And if that were the case, then that would be a big oversight on the part of leadership. You know, they run these things called hotlines, basically previewing how members of their caucuses will vote, so they have a sense of who's going where. We don't anticipate any surprises here. Now, I never say never, because politics, especially in this building, can be crazy sometimes. But at the same time, Gadi, you can say that something will have gone very, very wrong if any of these amendment votes pass.
It almost sounds like you're optimistic. Almost, right?
I don't know. I'm not willing to be optimistic yet, but talk to me in a few hours.
Yeah, hopefully you'll be in bed by midnight. Ali Vitale, thanks so much. Now, lawmakers have been going back and forth on a lot of things they don't like in that debt ceiling bill. The gas pipeline that we just talked about, defense spending, welfare, and then there's one issue, the issue of student loans, with a provision in the bill that has over 40 million Americans right now on edge. If that bill passes the Senate and makes it to President Biden's desk, it will restart student loan payments as soon as August 31st. Now, student loan payments have been on pause for nearly 3 years now, since the COVID-19 pandemic first started back in 2020. And in the middle of all that, at least 16 million Americans have been waiting to hear what's going to happen to the student loan forgiveness program, which is now tied up in the Supreme Court. NBC's Lindsay Reisner has been talking to folks about those payments starting back up again, and here she is with some more. Lindsay?
Gadi, no borrower has had to pay on their student loan payments while the Biden-Harris administration has been in office. You'll recall, former President Trump signed the CARES Act into law in March of 2020, placing that pause on these repayments for federal student loans. During this time, also, interest hasn't been accruing, but this new debt ceiling bill would put an end to that moratorium. So borrowers would have 60 days from June 30th. They would get a notice in the mail. They would have 21 days to start their repayments on that. This is in line with what the Biden administration has said all along. This is when they thought those repayments would start again. Republicans are saying that this measure will save taxpayers about $5 billion a month. Hardline Republicans, though, they are not happy with this debt ceiling bill, in part because they say it does not do enough to quash the Biden administration's debt forgiveness plan overall. That right now is being tied up in the Supreme Court. And so we've been talking here at Washington Square Park near NYU to students, to borrowers, about how this end to the moratorium will impact them. This is what they said.
I didn't realize it was going to be that soon and that abrupt. So, yeah, it's going to be a shock, because now we have to allocate more of a budget now to pay those back in a timely manner.
It's a little nerve-wracking. I mean, I guess just because the interest will start.
I'm honestly not too worried about it, just because I know the flexibility and I know what's available for me at this time.
On top of paying rent and wherever I'm going to be living after college, I have to worry about that as well.
So again, we have this issue of having to repay the student loans, and then we have this other issue of the student forgiveness that's currently tied up at the Supreme Court. That would be $10,000 for borrowers who qualify based on their income, $20,000 for Pell Grant recipients. A lot of students that we talked to today, they said they realized that this end to the moratorium would come at some point. They say it is what it is, but they are hoping to see some of their debt forgiven. They say that would be a huge relief to them. Gadi?
Lindsay Reiser, thanks so much. And NBC News has confirmed some new reporting today. Former President Donald Trump was caught on tape talking about classified documents that he took from the White House, and that tape has made its way into the hands of the special counsel investigating him. Now, this is all related to those classified documents that were found and removed from Trump's Mar-a-Lago home last summer. Now, to be clear, NBC News has not heard the recording, but sources say it happened back in July of 2021 at Trump's golf course in New Jersey. He was with a few people who, according to CNN, didn't have security clearances to access the classified info. Now, sources say Trump spoke about a planning document related to Iran and said on the tape that it was classified. Now, we know this tape was played for the grand jury that's been investigating this case, and Trump's pretty adamant that he hasn't done anything wrong. Here's what he said last year to Fox News.
If you're the president of the United States, you can declassify just by saying it's declassified, even by thinking about it.
NBC's Ken Delanian has more.
That's right, Gadi. A source directly familiar with the matter tells NBC News that Special Counsel Jack Smith's office has obtained a recording of former President Trump discussing a classified planning document that he had taken from his time at the White House. The source says the document that Trump kept described military options for striking Iran, and that the former president acknowledged on the tape that it was classified. The recording was said to be made in July 2021 during a meeting at Trump's golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, that included people who were helping the former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, write his memoir. Those people did not have security clearances. The source says the tape was played during testimony provided to the grand jury that has been investigating Trump's handling of classified documents. In a statement, a Trump spokesman branded the story as yet another leak from, quote, radical partisans behind what they called the political persecution designed to inflame tensions and continue the media's harassment of President Trump and his supporters. This tape would appear to be the most significant evidence to date that has come to public attention in this investigation, because it really undermines Trump's claims that he declassified all the records he took from the White House. It also suggests that he was aware that he was in possession of classified information long after he left the presidency, and that he discussed it with people not entitled to know about it. Some legal experts have called this a smoking gun in an investigation that appears to be nearing its end. Gadi?
Ken Delanian, thank you so much. In Davenport, Iowa, 2 of the 5 people missing after the partial building collapse have been found safe, but 3 remain unaccounted for, and officials think they are trapped in all that rubble. Meanwhile, the city released a pile of documents raising all kinds of questions about the building's deteriorating condition, with one engineer sounding the alarm just days before that collapse, saying that large patches of brick appear ready to fall imminently, and another masonry owner telling NBC News that he shared a dire warning with construction workers at the building the day before the collapse.
I literally begged them, please leave, you're going to die if you continue to work on it. It was just too dangerous for them to be there.
And joining us now from Davenport is NBC's Shaq Brewster. Shaq, we've been seeing some tweets throughout the day about heavy machinery moving about the site today, and then talk that it was taken out. Do we know what's going on there? Should we read into that? What's the latest at the collapse site?
Well, I did ask the mayor about the heavy machinery coming out. He did not address that specifically. He said this is something that they're reassessing each and every day, sometimes hour by hour. But I'll tell you, on that site, you can't see it behind me because of the fencing that's blocking it. But deep in the site, as close as you can get to the building, you see about 6 men in hard hats moving some bricks around. It's not clear exactly what's going on. I'll tell you, some of the family members of 2 of the men who were trapped in that building, just met with the city, and they say that city officials told them that some of the urban search and rescue teams have been reactivated. So officials have not told that to us yet, but that's at least the messaging that they're sending to members of the families.
And now to those documents, what did they tell us today?
Yeah, they really painted a picture that really, I should say, filled in the picture that so many residents have told us here. When you heard complaints about leaking water, cracks in the ceiling, these provided that proof, the complaints. We saw it there, and you also saw comments from the actual engineers who examined this building. You see some of the pictures from those reports now. One thing that we saw of the engineer saying that the clay brick facade on and between these window openings is bulging outwards by several inches and looks poised to fall. He goes on to say, in anticipation of these areas falling, the brick facade above the windows should be secured. So there was some suggestion, at least that the outer part of the building could have fallen. And we just got exclusive new video of the actual beginning of this crash. A source providing this video to us. I think we can play it now, but you see bricks start to crumble a little bit, and then you see the building almost completely fall. Apparently that video stopped right after that point because of the damage.
Wow. And just to clarify, we were showing some pictures there. Are you saying that those pictures, the ones that showed the buckling and the brick, that's not from right now on the part that's still standing? That was before the collapse, the same general area, and those 2x4s were kind of holding it up. Is that right?
100%, Gadi. Those pictures are from May 25th. That was the work that was being done to this building to help shore up that brick facade. What you're seeing there, the fact that those planks were used to hold up the wall, that is what a person who got denied to do this work for this project because he wanted to actually secure the building a little bit more. That's what raised alarms for him. He said that a day before the actual collapse, he went to workers who were working on the bricks outside the building. He told them, you need to come down. This is not safe. It's not worth your life. And we know what happened the next day, Gadi. You see it in that video. But yes, those pictures, those images are from actual city inspection reports showing that there was work being done and there were serious problems with the building in the days before this collapse.
There was work being done, there were workers being warned, and there were people still living inside. Shaq Brewster, unbelievable. Thanks so much. And all eyes are on the Senate. We are watching the debt ceiling vote go down there tonight. We're going to bring you updates throughout this hour. Plus, Canada's worsening wildfire crisis. Firefighters are now racing to contain more than a dozen wildfires burning out of control there. Details to the rush to get people to safety coming up, so stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. And here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Earlier today, President Biden fell on stage at the graduation ceremony for the U.S. Air Force Academy. Afterwards, he was helped up by 2 Secret Service agents and 1 Air Force official. White House rep said the president is fine and blamed the incident on a sandbag. In Texas, Raul Meza Jr. is behind bars after confessing to the murder of his roommate and implicating himself in the murder of another woman. Now, city officials are calling him a serial killer. They're looking into 8 to 10 more cold cases he might be connected to. Meza has previously been convicted for murdering an 8-year-old back in 1982, but was released from prison after only 11 years. In Southwest Florida, at least 30 Hispanic businesses closed for the day. It's in protest of this new law by Governor Ron DeSantis that he touts as the strongest anti-illegal immigration legislation in the country. It goes into effect July 1st and limits social services for undocumented immigrants. And one of the worst things about Los Angeles, definitely the traffic. And now LA County is considering charging drivers to access freeways with the hope that it'll lessen congestion. The LA MTA plans to release a study on it all later this summer. So much for the free in freeway. And lastly, the FDA just approved a new Pfizer vaccine that protects adults 60 and older from RSV. That's that nasty respiratory virus that was spreading like crazy this winter. Now, Pfizer says it expects the vaccine to be available a little bit later this year. And Tim Bleefnick, the Family Feud contestant who raised eyebrows with a joke about his marriage on national television, was just found guilty of murdering his wife. He was convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder for shooting his wife, Rebecca, back in February and was immediately put in handcuffs. You can see that happening right there. And that is something that's been catching a lot of attention, is how Tim spoke of his wife and their marriage on Family Feud. And it's a bit eerie after this conviction.
What's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?
Honey, I love you, but said I do. Not my mistake. Not my mistake. I love my wife.
And NBC's Nyala Charles joins us now. Nyala, this is wild. Everyone's seen that video, but walk us through this case. What was the most damning evidence in this case that was presented in court?
Well, Gadi, all of the evidence that the prosecutors presented was circumstantial, but still they said all of it together led straight to Timothy Bleefnick, and the jurors agreed. They found him guilty in just 4 hours without any DNA even linking him to the crime scene. So the first piece of evidence, on the days leading up to the murder, there was videotape of someone on a bike scoping out Rebecca Bleefnick's home. They said during those same exact times, Timothy Bleefnick's electronic devices were inactive. Then they found a bike ditched near the crime scene. And they said Timothy Bleefnick went on Facebook with a fake profile and bought that same bike just days before.
Wow. And This is one of those cases where, unfortunately, they had 3 kids. The father's now going away for murdering the mother. Do we know how the family is doing, how those kids are doing?
Yeah, this was an incredibly emotional trial. More than 40 people took the stand, Rebecca's family and friends, not to mention the fact that her father is the one who found her dead within her home, shot 14 times. Take a listen to what the family said after the trial.
We should not have to suffer a life without Becky. Becky was robbed of her life in the most hateful, cowardly, and cruel way. Her boys were robbed of a loving and devoted mother. I was robbed of my sister and best friend.
Gadi, prosecutors said the motive here was that all of this was happening during a pending divorce between Rebecca and Timothy that was going on for 2 years. Rebecca's sister even took the stand and said she got a text message from her sister saying if anything happened to her, that they should look at Tim. So that was another big thing in the case.
Heartbreaking. Nyla, thanks so much. And turning now to firefighters in Nova Scotia, where they are battling the largest wildfire in the province's history up there in Canada. The flames are hundreds of feet tall, and the blaze is still growing. NBC's Miguel Almaguer has the details.
Described as a rolling freight train, tonight these out-of-control wildfires in Nova Scotia have torched tens of thousands of acres, triggered mass evacuations, and destroyed hundreds of homes. The latest inferno to ignite near the city of Barrington is poised to explode as towering flames leap 300 feet high.
I would say the community's still in shock.
As plumes of smoke closed in on Alan Fry's home, his family escaped the blaze in their car.
It's really hard to watch the impact on everybody in terms of just day-to-day coming to grips with, all right, what do I have left?
Calling this unfolding emergency dangerous and volatile, at least 16 fires are burning, 4 of which are out of control. Authorities in Nova Scotia are pleading for help.
Firefighters are on their way from the United States. Firefighters are on their way from Costa Rica. Everyone is completely focused on fighting these fires.
With the region on edge, Charisse McCracken evacuated as flames tore through her subdivision.
There was sheer panic. It was dark. It was everybody everywhere, chaos.
Tonight, no lives have been lost, but these historic out-of-control wildfires are still raging. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News.
And now that Memorial Day is in our rearview mirror, the temperatures will keep ticking higher and higher as the summer season gets underway. And that also means it is the start of hurricane season in the Atlantic, and a tropical system is already starting to form in the Gulf. Let's go to NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns with the latest.
Gadi, what are the odds? We could have our first A-name storm on the first day of hurricane season. I don't know if that's ever happened. We're going to have to go back and dive in the record books. But regardless, we do have a tropical depression. The Hurricane Center started tracking that late this afternoon. And what that means is now it's organized well enough that they think that, it's going to move in a general direction. It possibly could become a tropical storm. And that's what they're, monitoring. So currently, all of the heavy rain from the system is out over the Gulf. There's a couple bands up in areas around Panama City and affecting the northern Gulf Coast, but nothing worse than that they'd get in a typical, Florida summer afternoon. And the same goes with the Florida Peninsula with numerous showers and storms. So the storm right now, it's just drifting, kind of meandering, but in the days ahead, it's going to begin to slowly head to the south. Kind of an unusual storm direction. Typically, when we get storms in the Gulf, they head north or they head towards Florida. This time, it's heading actually away from the U.S. and heading south somewhere near western Cuba by the time we get to Saturday evening. Notice, conditions are not favorable for this to get much stronger than it already is. So it may become Arlene or it may not. So if that happens, it would likely be in the next 24 hours if it's ever going to be a tropical storm, and then weakening and dissipating as it approaches western Cuba. So people in western Cuba shouldn't be really worried about this storm at all, just something to watch. As far as the rainfall goes, and with the tropical storms or tropical depressions, the number one concern is heavy rain, flash flooding, or river flooding. In this case, all the heavy rain is off the coast. Just typical afternoon showers and storms. Really, Orlando southwards will be the worst of it, so maybe some isolated flooding. So again, this is the start of our hurricane season, and we're expecting kind of an average season. And about every other year, we get one storm named named in June, so it wouldn't be crazy if we do get one. But the outlook is 12 to 17 and about 5 to 9 hurricanes. Typically, the first hurricane doesn't even form until August. So again, this storm's not going to do anything even close to that. The other story we've been watching is some incredible flooding coming out of North Texas, especially areas just south of Lubbock. There's been highways that have been washed out. Flood watch goes until 10 p.m., localized up to 4 inches of rain. And we've been tracking some pretty big storms that have been paralleling Interstate 20 all day long. And these have been dropping some about 4 inches of rain. And the problem has been some of the flash flooding and roads washed out. And again, 1 to 2 inches likely tomorrow. So as far as we're going to deal with the upcoming weekend, more spring storms in the middle of the country, Gadi. That'll be one of the stories, along with what happens to our tropical depression.
Bill Cairns, thanks so much. And coming up, lawsuits claim Amazon kept recordings of kids chatting with Alexa. Now the company is paying up. But first, you got to see this. Bill said it. Tropical storms are brewing, bringing heavy rain to parts of the south. Drone footage of Highway I-87 in O'Donnell, Texas shows that knee-deep waters left cars stalled and stranded. The camera also caught this crazy moment when a Good Samaritan rescued a teenager whose car was starting to sink. Now, that gentleman, who wishes to stay anonymous, was able to guide the teen back to safety, but not before a semi-truck nearly crashed right into that car. Dozens of other cars also had to be rescued before crews could shut down the highway, which got nearly 10 inches of rain. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. Let's get you caught up in 30 seconds. The Senate is racing against time to vote on that debt ceiling deal. Leaders are working on amendment votes that could pass the bill as early as tonight. And officials say 3 people are inside that collapsed building in Iowa. New documents are revealing warnings from engineers just days ago. And they say this building could have crumbled before it actually came down. And hurricane season is here, and it's kicking off with a tropical storm forming in the Gulf. We're keeping an eye on where it's headed next. Over to the Senate floor, lawmakers are still voting on amendments to the Fiscal Responsibility Act. That's the debt ceiling bill that the House passed last night, and the Senate is now racing to pass by tonight to avoid getting too close to that June 5th default deadline. And NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale is back with us to tell us what's going on right now. So, Ali, what's it looking like? I know that earlier you were saying hopefully by 11 o'clock. Does that still look like it's possibly on time?
Well, slow progress here, Gadi. They're now on the second of these 11 amendment votes, and Senator Schumer, the majority leader, did just get on the floor in the last few minutes, urging his colleagues to stay in their seats. He said, "We were indulgent on the last round, but everyone please be here so that we can make this go more quickly." He had very "I will turn this car around" vibes, if you will allow me that descriptor, for the majority leader. But they are now, as you see the floor, looking much more populated. That's ideal because it means that everyone will be on the floor, able to vote more quickly, and each of these subsequent votes now should be 10 minutes each. That should put us around 11 o'clock for when this finishes up, and they actually do the vote that everybody's looking for, which is the final vote in this 12-vote series on the actual fiscal responsibility bill. That's that debt ceiling bill that will avoid a default and also deal with some spending measures as negotiated by the White House and Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
They better keep that car on the road because the car is about to run out of gas come June 5th. I mean, when it comes to these standout amendments, right now, what does it look like is the biggest hurdle? Is there one that does look like it has more of a chance of passing than others, or do they all look like they are dead on arrival, procedural, and just kind of a way to get the wiggles out?
Yeah, it's definitely wiggles over here. I was actually talking with someone after you and I finished earlier in the hour saying that if one of these passes, it would be a real problem. And the person joked back to me, "Oh, we would just default on our debt." There has been a lot of painstaking work done before these votes hit the floor to make sure that they don't have the votes to pass. I do think there's something interesting, though, when you look at what several of these amendments deal with. It's how much money is allocated for defense spending. And it's why we've seen a lot of Republican senators saying that they think this is, in Lindsey Graham's words, a joke of a budget for the U.S. military. He's pushing, in one of the amendment votes that we'll see here, is for more supplemental spending on things like the war in Ukraine, trying to make sure that America is not necessarily freezing spending on military spending, even though that's what's in this deal. So even if that amendment doesn't pass, there are clear conversations that are happening, and Senator Schumer just said this on the floor. The Senate could go around and still appropriate more money to things like Ukraine, even though this debt deal puts a spending cap on defense spending right now. So that's one of the clear things that Republican senators were upset about in this deal, that they're putting amendments forward on now. And even though these amendments aren't going anywhere, the point is still being made. And in the fall, when they actually do spending and budget battles, which is when they're supposed to be done, that is likely to come up again.
It's almost like a place marker for a promise down the road.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like a, hey, I see you, pinky promise, we'll do it. If not now, then a few months from now.
Got it. Ali Vitale, thanks so much. Now, turning to Ring cameras or Alexa home assistants, so many of us have them in our home, and so many of us also have children in our home. And if you do, you might want to listen up, because Amazon is about to pay millions of dollars in settlements because the FTC says these products have some serious privacy issues. NBC's Jesse Kirsch has more.
Tonight, Amazon has agreed to pay $25 million after federal authorities say the company sacrificed privacy for profits when it held on to children's personal information, even after parents asked the company to delete that data collected with Alexa.
Alexa, hello. Hi. That voice is practically everywhere. The FTC says more than 100 million Alexa-enabled devices like this Echo Dot Kids have been sold worldwide.
The FTC also says Ring, an Amazon subsidiary, has sold more than 1 million cameras like this one.
So you can see every corner of your home.
The indoor cameras branded as something to make the home safer, but authorities say some cameras actually left customers exposed to illegal surveillance. Amazon now agreeing to pay nearly $6 million over that claim.
When you set up a Ring camera like this one, you can keep an eye on home from afar. But the FTC says homeowners weren't the only ones alleging that Ring gave all of its employees, quote, full access to every customer video.
The federal complaint says the issues predate Amazon's 2018 purchase of Ring. And in a statement, Amazon says our devices and services are built to protect customers' privacy. While we disagree with the FTC's claims regarding both Alexa and Ring and deny violating the law, these settlements put these matters behind us. Both settlements are subject to court approval.
We put our trust in the companies that we use with our devices, and we trust them to do what they say they're going to do with our data.
As technology and privacy concerns continue to collide. Jesse Kirsch, NBC News.
And today is officially the start of Pride Month, but this year it feels a bit different. Companies are facing backlash over supporting LGBTQ causes, and NBC's Stephanie Gosk has that story.
June is Pride Month, and there's no missing its kickoff. Rainbow flags are everywhere. There are T-shirts and hats. Apple has a watch. Absolute Vodka has a special bottle.
Companies have got more involved in Pride as a sign of how the whole culture is changing.
But this year, the landscape has shifted.
You are going to get rainbow vomit on everything across corporate America.
Some corporations stepping into a fierce fight over transgender issues. It plays out in state houses.
When you bow your heads in prayer, you see the blood on your hands.
And on cable news.
The same people who encourage minors to have life-altering hormones and surgery on their genitalia and even begin transitioning without parental consent, they have done and are doing enormous damage to young people.
Target moved its Pride Month merchandise, including a transgender-friendly bathing suit, to the back of some of its stores after customer backlash.
Okay, these are like naked people in shirts.
Its stock price dropped more than 15% in 2 weeks.
I got some Bud Lights for us.
Bud Light marketed a customized can featuring transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney, triggering an outcry. Sales dropped nearly 30%. There are calls to boycott Kohl's because of its Pride-themed baby clothes, and North Face, the outdoor company, as well.
We like to call this little tour the Summer of Pride.
Transgender issues still seem strange and scary to people.
20 states have passed bans on transgender medical treatment for minors.
Does this very angry debate cast a shadow over some of the progress that has been made?
I think everyone is aware that issues that seemed to be settled just a few years ago are up for grabs again.
Pride organizers across the country tell NBC News Digital that their once eager sponsors are now more hesitant, growing fearful a backlash will target their bottom line. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, New York.
And up next, Elon Musk's unique take on the tense relationship between the U.S. and China, plus the growing power and impact of those QR codes, how commerce is quickly being reinvented in one of the world's fastest growing countries. Hey, welcome back. The United States is accusing a group of Iranian and Turkish people of plotting to kill Americans. That story tops around the world tonight. The group includes members of Iran's military. Now, according to the U.S. Treasury, former U.S. government officials, journalists, and activists were targeted in this plot, and the U.S. is now sanctioning those involved, blocking access to their U.S. money and property, and barring Americans and American firms from working with them. And now over to China, where Elon Musk visited a Tesla gigafactory in Shanghai, as well as met with government officials in Beijing. Now, according to Chinese officials, Musk described China and the United States as conjoined twins with the same interests. Now, Mr. Musk, who also owns Twitter, did not tweet during that trip. The platform is actually banned in China. And it was a party in the streets of Jerusalem today for the kickoff of Pride Month. Celebrations, though, were somewhat dimmed under Israel's new religiously conservative government there. According to the Washington Post, one member of the government even pledged to abolish the parade. Another has homophobic history. And organizers say around 30,000 people showed up, a much bigger crowd than in recent years. And more help is coming for Ukraine's war effort in the form of satellites. Now, the Pentagon will fund SpaceX Starlink terminals to help Kyiv defend itself against the Russian invasion. Starlink is SpaceX's global network of over 4,000 satellites that provide communication services to more than 50 countries. Do you remember when QR codes were everywhere during the pandemic? Well, in India, these codes are taking over the country and changing the game for vendors. NBC's Janice Mackey-Frayer has that story.
Everywhere you go in India, on every street, at every food stall, a revolution is underway in the country's sprawling economy and how people here are engaging with it. It's happening because of this, India's homegrown digital payment system. In an instant, customers can pay for virtually anything using a smartphone. And that's a huge shift in a place long driven by cash. Those QR codes are scattered among carts and store counters and attractions, where lo-fi intersects with high-tech to reinvent commerce in what is now the world's most populous country.
How it works, you need a smartphone and a bank account to link it to. Then you scan the code, enter your password, and that's it. It's instant. There's no cash changing hands. These codes are revolutionizing transactions here, and there are huge numbers of people in all corners of the country that are being brought into the formal economy through these tiny codes.
While digital payments are the norm in places like China, India's mobile app transactions dwarf anything happening in the West. Over $1 trillion in transactions were processed last year, and there are no transaction fees. The platform is run by a nonprofit. India's prime minister has boasted that India leads the world in real-time digital payments by clocking almost 40% of all such transactions. Now, for most people, Unified Payments Interface, or UPI as it's called, makes daily life easier and banking more accessible. For the government, it's extended the reach of programs and of tax collection, and it acts as a sort of glue with India on the rise.
The fact that India has developed and economically, and its size, its population has become an asset rather than a liability.
There are still concerns over data privacy that are lingering, but that UPI is now embedded on such a scale here is something India wants to export to other developing countries. Digital networks connecting more people than ever before.
Fascinating. Thanks so much, Janice. And before we go, we're going to introduce you to a Philadelphia man who has been on a mission for decades after losing his son, and it is quite inspirational. But first, nearing the final countdown, we are checking back with the Virgin Galactic crew as they pave the way for commercial spaceflight. That's today's Future of Everything, so stay tuned. And now to the future. Virgin Galactic is about to become the latest private company to launch paying customers into space, and that is right around the corner in late June. And right now, everything looks to be on track after the final test space flight was a big success, according to the company. Now, a few weeks ago, we chatted with two of the crew members of Unity 25. There they are. That's Jamila Gilbert and Chris Huey, both in absolute awe of their view about 50 miles above the rest of us Earthlings down here. Now, that whole trip lasted about 90 minutes, takeoff to touchdown, a little less than what it takes to get from LA to New Mexico.
3, 2, 1, release, release, release. Fire, fire. Welcome to space. Beautiful.
And Jamila Gilbert and Chris Huey are back with their feet on planet Earth. Jamila, you're in New Mexico. Chris, you are here in LA. That looked like a very different flight from what you normally get flying across the country, right?
It absolutely was. It was breathtaking and just the most unbelievably vibrant. Looking back at planet Earth, our home planet, it was undeniable vibrancy. It was just phenomenal. So absolutely, very different flight than anything we've previously taken.
I mean, and just if we could stay on this picture, Chris, your face is just, I mean, it looks like you can't understand what you're seeing. And Jamila, you look speechless too. There's this thing that astronauts talk about, the overview effect, where you look back down on planet Earth and you realize we are this tiny planet in this vast universe. What went through your minds?
Well, I think for me, I was first just dumbfounded and still pinching myself in disbelief in real time. The Earth is so beautiful and such a spectacle to look at, and I just couldn't look away, to be honest, and it was just so surprising and shocking to see it. The overview effect is, you hear a lot about it in the astronaut and space community, and I think it takes some time to really settle in and really process what you just went through and what it all means, and I think Jamila and I are still working through that, to be honest.
It is Jamila, a lot to digest.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's a ton to digest, and it was the single most. I mean, we were speechless, and looking down at the planet, there are no words. And I think Chris said it perfectly right, is awestruck. You're looking at it and there are not words. There is a pull. You get closer to the window and you realize you cannot look away. If you wanted to, you cannot look away. It is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's such an incredible perspective. Now, turning to the mission, how did that go? What kind of things are Virgin Galactic, you guys going to be reviewing? Because the first commercial flight, that's going to happen in a couple of weeks, right? I know training is going to be a big deal.
Yes, absolutely. We're really excited to get into commercial flights, and we have one with the Italian Air Force, which is a research flight coming up very, very soon. But as to our Unity 25 mission, we're still going through debrief, still having conversations. But from where we were sat, it was a beautiful, beautiful flight, and we were lucky enough to experience it as our customers would. So it was just getting to take in the experience and having that moment of joy, that moment of awe, and it is really something to write home about. We're really, really happy, really pleased, and yeah, it was spectacular.
And I got to ask about the thrust. What did that feel like?
Ooh, yeah, the thrust is an amazing experience. I'd say it's almost incomparable. It feels a lot like riding a roller coaster, but then feels nothing like it. It's just way beyond that. You're instantly just pinned into your seat, and then you feel the acceleration and the G's really on your body, and you just can't help but smile and just feel the thrill of seeing the sky get darker and darker and darker, and then out of the corner of your eye out the window, you see the Earth behind you. Taken all together, it's just a very unique and one-of-a-kind experience.
Yeah, I think seeing the sky from light blue to a Navy to a Black was something exceptional. And that power, you know, shout out to the propulsion team. That power was phenomenal and so smooth. It was a really smooth ride.
You've got thrust, you've got the overview effect, and you've also got the flight down to maybe zero gravity-ish. And yet, tickets are about 250,000 when we first started, like 450, 500K now. Like, that is the definition of astronomical. When do you think spaceflight is going to get affordable for the rest of us?
You know, I can't speak to that. There's a lot of different companies taking a pass at it, and I think that those things will continue to evolve later down the line. And I think that just making it more accessible from that initial point, where even you just don't even have to have perfect vision in order to get on this, right? We're going to be making it more affordable, more accessible, I should say, to future customers. And that's just a really incredible thing.
Oh, Jamila, I see what you did. Thanks a lot for the glasses shout out. Fingers crossed I can get up there soon. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you, Gadi.
Thanks.
And now for tonight's Best of Us. Incredible people doing incredible things. A Philadelphia man has recently become one of the longest tenured volunteers at a children's hospital, and we want to tell you all about him. His name is Mike Cray. He spends about 14 hours a week at St. Christopher's doing everything from holding babies to joking with young patients to helping families through some of the hardest moments of their lives. So what is it that drives 20 years of volunteering? Well, for Michael Cray, it is the memory of his son, Ian, who was a patient at St. Christopher's when he died at 9 years old from complications of cystic fibrosis. Mike is with us right now. Mike, welcome. I got to ask, some people that are watching this, they're going to see this and they're going to say, wow, this is somebody that went back to the place that caused so many painful memories. Why did you go back?
It started off as a need. I would tell anyone, if you're going to volunteer, focus on the things that you can't stand, that you can't change, and do the stuff you can do. And so a lot of it was the fact that we couldn't bring Ian back, and we wanted to help people. This is my wife and I both. Wanted to help the people that we could help, affect the outcomes we could affect.
And Michael, tell us a little bit.
Oh, please.
We're seeing these beautiful pictures of your son there. Can you tell us a little bit more about him? What did he like to do? What do you think he'd be doing now?
He liked to read. He liked to write. He had already written his first book. Very incredibly insightful kid. And, you know, people with diseases like his often have a sense of immediacy, how much the minutes have to count. He was special even in that regard. He had a sense that people needed him. I don't know another kid like him. And my wife and I have been given 3 of the most remarkable children I've ever seen.
It's incredible to see how you're keeping his memory alive. What's the best part of the work that you do there at the hospital?
The best part is being around the people, the care for the hospital. It's honestly, it started off as something I needed to do. It still is. It has become just, I love driving up there and thinking about the people I'm going to be next to when I'm there. People that throw themselves to save children are just different. They don't have to do it. They choose to. Everybody in that hospital is a volunteer. Most of what they do is of a voluntary nature, and that's what patients see. And it's just fun to be around. That's why I'm still there.
And you see families going through some of the toughest times on a daily basis. What advice do you have to families that are dealing with a child in intensive care?
1 minute at a time. To ask as many questions as you can of the staff. Absorb what you can. Be there for each other. I tell them they are in the right place, because they are. And that's the best you can do. It's good enough, because I was on the receiving end of it, my wife and I both, many, many times. And it's miraculous what acts of kindness, these voluntary acts of kindness by the staff, can carry you through.
By the staff and by volunteers like you, Mike Cray, I can't thank you enough for what you do. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Could you imagine if the world was filled with more people like Mike, and to think that potential is in all of us? That does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.